As Sonia moved toward the entrance, one of the men whispered, "That's her. Make it quick." Then, gunshots. Chaos broke out. Sonia screamed as Timothy grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the car. "Ma, get down," he shouted. He reversed with full speed, bullets shattering the rear glass. Heart pounding, Sonia looked at him, for the first time, not as a driver, but as a savior. The morning sun poured through the large glass windows of a magnificent mansion in Banana Island, Lagos. The sprawling compound glittered like a small palace. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and the staff moved quietly, afraid to draw attention to themselves. At the center of it all lived Sonia Okori, a name that echoed in business circles across Nigeria. In her late 30s, unmarried, elegant, and incredibly rich, Sonia was the CEO of a multi-million naira conglomerate that traded across Africa. Her beauty was breathtaking, smooth brown skin, well-groomed hair, and an aura of power that made people bow without question. But behind that beauty was a sharp tongue and a heart hardened by years of betrayal and business wars. That morning, her driver Timothy stood near her black SUV, waiting patiently with his cap in hand. He was a man in his early 40s, tall, dark, and well-built, with a calmness that spoke of deep humility. His salary was small, but his loyalty was priceless. "Timothy," Sonia's voice rang out from the top of the marble stairs. "Why are you standing there like a tree? Open the car door. I have no time to waste." "Yes, Ma," Timothy said, hurrying to open the back door. She entered the car without a glance at him. He drove quietly, his eyes fixed on the road, his mind wandering. He had worked for her for 3 years and had never heard her say thank you. Still, he respected her deeply. As they drove through the streets of Ikoyi, Sonia's phone rang. She spoke in an icy tone to her assistant, her words clipped and firm. "I said the deal must go through today. If Mr. Chuka refuses to sign, tell him I'll crush his company myself." Timothy sighed quietly. He knew that name, Mr. Chuka, one of Sonia's business rivals, known to play dirty. Minutes later, they arrived at a secluded business venue outside town. Sonia stepped out confidently, unaware that danger awaited her. 3 men, dressed casually, loitered nearby, their eyes cold and watchful. Timothy noticed them. Something felt wrong. His instincts tightened. As Sonia moved toward the entrance, one of the men whispered, "That's her. Make it quick." Then, gunshots. Chaos broke out. Sonia screamed as Timothy grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the car. "Ma, get down," he shouted. He reversed with full speed, bullets shattering the rear glass. Heart pounding, Sonia looked at him, for the first time, not as a driver, but as a savior. They sped through a dusty road that led out of town, into a narrow path that wound toward the forest. The gunman followed closely behind. Timothy pushed the car to its limit, but after several minutes of wild driving, the fuel gauge hit empty. The car sputtered and stopped. "Ma, come down. Run," Timothy shouted. They jumped out of the car and ran into the thick bush as gunshots echoed behind them. The assassins followed, crashing through the undergrowth, but after several minutes of pursuit, they lost sight of their targets. Timothy pulled Sonia behind a large fallen tree, both panting heavily. They stayed hidden for several minutes, listening as the sound of their pursuers faded deeper into the forest. When the silence returned, Sonia whispered, Are they gone?" "I think so, Ma," Timothy replied quietly. "But we can't stay here. We should try to find our way out." They stood up and began walking, trying to find a path back to civilization. But the more they walked, the more they realized they were lost. The queen of her world, the billionaire who had everything, was now stranded in a wilderness, with only her poor driver to depend on. The forest was thick, wild, and endless. The trees rose high like green giants, their branches locking together to block out the sun. Strange bird calls echoed in the distance, and every rustle made Sonia's heart race faster. "Timothy, where are we?" she asked in a trembling voice, brushing away sweat and leaves from her face. Timothy looked around, trying to stay calm. "We're still in the forest, Ma. But don't worry, we'll find a way out. We just need to keep moving." They walked for what felt like hours. The city sounds were long gone. Only the whisper of the wind and the crunch of dry leaves under their feet kept them company. Sonia, who had never walked more than a few meters without her driver or guards, was exhausted. Her expensive shoes were torn, and her neat clothes were covered in dirt and scratches. She stumbled and grabbed a tree for support. "Timothy," she groaned. "I can't go any further. My legs, they hurt." Timothy stopped and turned back. His shirt was soaked with sweat, but his eyes were calm. "We can rest for a while, Ma," he said softly, leading her to a fallen log. As Sonia sat down, she looked around helplessly. The reality hit her hard. Her mansion, her cars, her power, none of it mattered here. In the forest, she was just another human being. Timothy broke a branch and cleared some leaves nearby. "Let me get you some water," he said, walking toward the sound of a stream he had noticed earlier. Minutes later, he returned with his hands cupped full of clear water. Sonia hesitated, looking at it as though it was beneath her. But her throat was dry, and thirst overpowered pride. She drank. "Thank you," she whispered, the first time Timothy ever heard that word from her lips. As evening fell, the forest turned dark and cold. The sounds of crickets filled the air. Timothy gathered dry wood and made a small fire using a lighter from his pocket. The flames flickered, casting a warm glow on their tired faces. "Timothy," Sonia said after a long silence, her voice soft and uncertain. "Do you think those men will still come after us?" He looked at her across the fire. "I don't think so, Ma. But we'll be careful. When the sun rises, we'll try to find a road again." As the night deepened, the fire crackled softly. Sonia leaned her head back against the tree and whispered, "Timothy, thank you for saving my life." He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "It's my duty, Ma." But deep in his heart, it was more than duty. He just didn't know how to say it. Above them, the stars shone through gaps in the trees, watching silently as two souls from different worlds began to draw closer, bound by fear, fate, and a spark of something neither of them yet understood. The morning came slowly, with rays of sunlight piercing through the thick canopy. Birds chirped above as if welcoming a new beginning. Sonia opened her eyes and found Timothy sitting by the fading fire, sharpening a stick into a spear. He turned and smiled slightly. "Good morning, Ma. You should rest a bit more." Sonia rubbed her eyes. Her body ached, and her stomach growled quietly. "I'm hungry," she murmured. "I figured," Timothy said, standing up. "I'll look around for fruits, or maybe something edible. Please don't move far from here." He walked off carefully, leaving Sonia alone by the fire. For the first time in years, she sat in silence. No ringing phone, no assistance, no meetings. Just the sound of nature and her own thoughts. She looked at her dirty clothes and bruised hands and sighed. So this is what it feels like to be helpless. Minutes later, Timothy returned with some mangoes and a few wild berries. He offered them to her. "It's not much, Ma, but it should help." Sonia took a bite. The fruit juice dripped down her fingers, and she laughed softly, something Timothy had never heard before. "I can't remember the last time I ate mango this way," she said, smiling faintly. Timothy chuckled. Sometimes it's the simple things that remind us what life really means. Their eyes met briefly, a quiet moment of warmth amid the wilderness. As the day passed, they continued their journey, trying to find a way out of the forest. But every direction seemed to lead them deeper in. The sun burned overhead, and by afternoon, Sonia was weak again. Timothy found a small stream and helped her sit by it. He dipped his handkerchief into the cool water and gently wiped her forehead. "Timothy," she whispered, watching him. "Why are you doing all this for me?" He paused, his hand still on her skin. "Because you're my boss, and because it's the right thing to do." Sonia shook her head slowly. "No, you're doing more than any driver would. You could have left me behind when the car stopped. You could have run for your own life." Timothy looked away, his voice low. "Some things are worth more than life itself, Ma. Loyalty, kindness, love. Maybe I just believe in those things." His last word hung in the air, love. Sonia felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. That night, they made shelter under a large tree. Timothy built another fire while Sonia sat close, watching him with quiet admiration. The proud billionaire was changing, humility and gratitude softening the edges of her once cold heart. "Timothy," she said suddenly, "I was wrong about people like you." He looked up, confused. "People like me?" "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought money made people important. But here in this forest, it's you keeping me alive, not my wealth." Timothy smiled gently, poking the fire with a stick. "Maybe God wanted you to see life differently, Ma." Sonia nodded slowly. Maybe he did. As the flames flickered between them, their eyes met again, longer this time. No words, no distance, just silent understanding. The forest, once their prison, had become a place of revelation, where fear turned to faith, and pride slowly transformed into love. The third day in the forest came with dark clouds and a restless wind. Sonia and Timothy were weak, tired, and hungry. Every path they took led to more trees, more confusion. The forest seemed endless. "Timothy," Sonia said softly, her voice breaking, "maybe we'll never get out of here." He looked at her and smiled faintly despite his exhaustion. "Don't say that, Ma. As long as we're alive, there's hope." They walked slowly, supporting each other through the muddy ground. Suddenly, the sound of rushing water filled the air. Timothy's eyes brightened. "A river," he exclaimed. "Where there's a river, there's a way out." They followed the sound until they reached the bank of a wide, flowing river. The water shimmered under the dull sky, and a faint drizzle began to fall. On the other side, they could see what looked like a footpath and smoke rising, a sign of people. Hope returned to Sonia's weary heart. As they looked around, a figure appeared, an old fisherman in a tattered shirt, paddling a small wooden canoe meant for one person. "Good afternoon, sir," Timothy called out, waving. "Please, can you help us cross to the other side?" The fisherman paddled closer, studying them carefully. "Where Unaday come from?" he asked in a deep, husky voice. Timothy quickly explained how they had been attacked and got lost in the forest. The fisherman's face softened. "Ah, God don't save Una," he said, nodding. "Climb inside. I go carry Una go across. But make Una hold well low. This river day vex sometimes." The canoe was small, barely enough for the three of them. Sonia stepped in nervously, gripping the edge tightly as Timothy helped her sit. The fisherman began to paddle. Halfway through the river, the sky darkened completely. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind picked up speed. Waves formed, rocking the small boat dangerously. "Timothy!" Sonia screamed as water splashed over them. "Hold on, Ma!" Timothy shouted, trying to steady the canoe. But the storm grew stronger. The fisherman yelled, "The river don vex. Hold something!" Before anyone could react, a violent wave hit the canoe, and it capsized. The world became chaos. Water everywhere. The current was fierce, pulling them apart. Sonia struggled, choking, her arms flailing helplessly. "Timothy!" she cried, her voice fading under the roar of the storm. Timothy fought against the raging water, his eyes searching desperately. He caught a glimpse of her sinking beneath the surface. Without hesitation, he dived after her, kicking hard, fighting against the current. He reached her just in time, wrapped his arm around her waist, and pushed upward with all his strength. She was limp, unconscious. "God, please help me," he gasped, forcing both of them toward the shore. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, he dragged her onto the riverbank, coughing and shivering. Sonia lay motionless, her hair wet and her face pale. "Ma? Sonia?" Timothy called, patting her cheeks. She didn't respond. He quickly pressed on her chest, trying to get the water out of her lungs. "Please, Ma, don't die on me," he whispered, his voice cracking. Then she coughed. Water spilled from her mouth, and she gasped weakly for air. "Thank you, Jesus," Timothy breathed, tears mixing with the rain. He carried her in his arms, away from the river, into a small dry patch beneath a large tree. There, he laid her gently and wrapped her in his shirt to keep her warm. As night fell and the rain slowed, Timothy sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall. She was alive, but unconscious. He whispered, "You'll be fine, Ma. I promise." And through the long, cold night, Timothy stayed awake, guarding her, praying silently, and holding on to the one thing stronger than fear, love. Morning crept gently over the forest. The storm had passed, leaving the air cool and damp. The ground was covered in fallen leaves and broken branches. Birds chirped again, as if celebrating survival after the long night of chaos. Timothy sat by Sonia's side, his back against the tree, eyes red from staying awake. He had barely moved all night, afraid that if he closed his eyes, she might stop breathing. When he felt her stir, his heart leaped. Sonia's eyelashes fluttered, and her lips moved weakly. "Timothy," she whispered. He leaned forward quickly. "Ma, thank God you're awake. Please, don't move too fast." She opened her eyes slowly, confused. Where are we?" "Still in the forest," he replied softly. "The canoe capsized in the storm. I managed to bring you out." "The fisherman? I couldn't find him." Sonia blinked, tears forming. "You saved my life again." Timothy smiled faintly, brushing mud from her face with a trembling hand. "I couldn't have left you, Ma." For a moment, she just stared at him, His wet clothes, his tired eyes, the bruises on his arms. He looked strong yet gentle, his face filled with quiet courage. "Timothy," she said softly, "I don't know what I would have done without you." He looked away shyly. "It's okay, Ma. You don't need to thank me." But she insisted. "No, I do. You risked your life for me, twice." Silence followed. Only the soft hum of the forest surrounded them. Sonia looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. She wasn't used to feeling small, vulnerable, or cared for. Her entire life had been about control and power. Yet here she was, alive only because of this humble man. As the sun rose higher, Timothy stood and said, "I'll find something for you to eat." He returned later with roasted yams he had managed to dig up and cook over a small fire. Sonia smiled faintly as he handed her a piece. "You even cook?" she teased gently. He chuckled. "I learned to survive, Ma. When life gets hard, you learn to do everything." She nodded thoughtfully. "I never had to learn that. Everything was always done for me." Timothy smiled. "Well, God has a way of teaching us things we never planned to learn." Sonia looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. This man, he doesn't even know how special he is, she thought. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Sonia felt warmth not just from the fire, but from the way Timothy looked at her, with respect, gentleness, and something deeper that words couldn't describe. "Timothy," she said softly, breaking the silence, "when we get out of here, I'll make sure your life changes. You'll never lack again." He smiled humbly. "Thank you, Ma, but I didn't do all this for reward. I just wanted to see you safe." Her chest tightened. His words struck her deeply. For the first time in years, Sonia felt something genuine, a connection not built on money or power, but kindness. That night, as the fire flickered and the forest hummed with life, Sonia found herself watching Timothy's face as he drifted into sleep. She saw peace there, something she had chased for years in boardrooms and mansions, but never found. She whispered softly, "You're different, Timothy, and I think my heart knows it." Days passed slowly in the forest. The fear of being hunted had faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of survival. Sonia and Timothy worked together, fetching water, roasting what little food they could find, and sleeping side by side near the warmth of their small fire. Each sunrise brought new strength, but also a deeper bond neither of them could ignore. One morning, as Sonia watched Timothy washing his face by the riverbank, she couldn't help but study him differently. The sunlight caught his face, highlighting the firmness of his jaw and the quiet strength in his eyes. His shirt was torn, his hands rough, yet there was something noble about him, something her wealth could never buy. She smiled faintly. "Timothy, you don't even look like a driver anymore. You look like a hero from a movie." He turned and laughed softly. "A hero? No, Ma. I'm just a man trying to stay alive." "But you've saved me twice," she said, her voice sincere. "That makes you a hero to me." He paused, meeting her gaze for a moment before looking away. "I'm just doing what's right." The air grew quiet between them. Sonia felt her heart beat faster. Something in his humility touched a part of her soul that had long been empty. Later that day, as they rested beneath a large tree, Sonia spoke again, her tone softer than ever. "Timothy, can I ask you something personal?" He nodded. "Yes, Ma. Why aren't you married?" Timothy smiled faintly, glancing at the sky. "I was in love once, but she left when things got tough. Said she couldn't live with a man who had nothing." Sonia looked down, feeling a strange sting in her chest. "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "It's okay. I learned that love without patience isn't love at all." Sonia's voice trembled as she replied, "You deserve someone better. Someone who sees your heart, not your pocket." He turned to her, surprised. "And what about you, Ma? Why are you not married?" She smiled sadly. "Because no man ever saw me for who I am. They saw my money, my company, my fame, but not me. Not Sonia." For a moment, they just looked at each other, two lonely souls who had found something rare in the most unexpected place. That night, as the fire flickered and the moonlight bathed the forest in silver, Sonia couldn't hold her thoughts anymore. "Timothy," she whispered. He looked up from where he sat. "Yes, Ma? Do you ever think maybe God made this happen for a reason?" He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "Maybe I was meant to see what really matters in life. Maybe I was meant to meet you this way." Timothy stared at her, unsure of what to say. The silence that followed was heavy, full of emotions neither of them dared to name. Finally, Sonia reached for his hand, hesitant, trembling. "You've shown me more love and care in a few days than I've known in years. And I don't know why, Timothy, but I feel something for you. Timothy froze, his heart pounding. Ma, please, you don't have to. She interrupted softly. Don't call me Ma right now. Just Sonia. He looked into her eyes, seeing sincerity and warmth that melted every wall between them. I don't know how it happened, she continued, her voice breaking. But somewhere between the fear, the pain, and the silence, I fell for you. Timothy swallowed hard, torn between duty and emotion. He wanted to speak, but words failed him. Instead, he gently squeezed her hand and whispered, Sonia, you don't know what that means to me. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, no title, no wealth, no status stood between them. Just two hearts that had found each other in the wilderness. Morning came quietly over the forest, painting the trees in shades of gold. Sonia and Timothy sat close to the fading fire, silent but content. They had survived storms, hunger, and fear, yet what felt most powerful was the quiet bond that had grown between them. As Timothy went to fetch water, Sonia thought deeply about her life. The big mansion, the expensive cars, the endless business meetings. None of it had ever filled her heart the way these few days with Timothy had. Suddenly, the sound of distant voices broke the calm. Sonia stood, listening. It was faint, but clear. Men calling out, the bark of dogs, the hum of engines. Rescue had come. Timothy, she shouted, excitement trembling in her voice. Someone's here. He rushed back, his face bright with relief. Thank God. Moments later, a team of police officers emerged from the trees, led by her personal assistant and a few local security men. Sonia was wrapped in a blanket, weak but safe. Timothy stood nearby, watching quietly, as the officers attended to her. When one of the policemen asked, Madam, is this the man who was with you? Sonia turned to look at Timothy. She smiled softly. Yes, he's the reason I'm still alive. The officer nodded respectfully. He's a brave man. As they were driven back to the city, Sonia leaned against the window, lost in thought. Timothy sat silently beside the driver, his eyes fixed ahead. Neither spoke, but both knew something had changed forever. Back home, days later, Sonia lay on her soft bed, but her heart was restless. The comfort that once meant everything now felt empty. Her mind replayed every moment in the forest. Timothy's calm voice, his strong arms pulling her from the river, the warmth of his care when she was unconscious. She realized she missed him deeply. Unable to hold it in any longer, Sonia called her driver's quarters the next morning. Tell Timothy I want to see him in the living room, she said. When he entered, he bowed slightly. Good morning, Ma. Her heart tightened. Timothy, please sit. He hesitated. No, Ma. I prefer to stand. She looked at him with gentle eyes. You saved my life. You cared for me when I was helpless. You made me see what real love looks like. I can't pretend I don't feel something for you. Timothy's eyes widened. Ma, please. Don't call me Ma. She interrupted softly, tears forming. Call me Sonia. He swallowed hard. Sonia. She stepped closer. I've had everything. Money, power, fame, but none of it ever made me happy. You did. You made me feel human again. Timothy looked into her eyes, torn between humility and emotion. I never thought someone like you could ever love a man like me. She smiled through her tears. Love doesn't ask for titles or class, Timothy. It just happens. There was silence for a long moment. Then she whispered, I love you. He stepped forward, his voice low. And I love you too. They embraced, two souls that life had tried to keep apart, now united by something stronger than wealth or pride. Months later, the headlines read, Billionaire Businesswoman Marries Her Former Driver, a love story that defied all odds. Sonia and Timothy stood hand in hand at the altar, surrounded by family, staff, and friends. The same woman who once ruled with pride now walked in humility and joy. As they exchanged vows, Timothy whispered, You turned my life into a dream I never thought possible. Sonia smiled, eyes glistening. And you taught me that love is the only wealth that never fades. The congregation erupted in applause as they sealed their union with a kiss, a perfect ending to a story written by fate itself.